Um, calling our meeting to order at 4:21. And read the beginning of the statement. Is the Housing First Subcommittee meeting has now commenced. It is May 31st at 4:21. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and protect the public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak. Avoid feedback and background noise. For those who have dialed in using a call-in number, to unmute to speak, dial *6, #6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to request to speak or to announce that you are leaving the meeting so that we can track quorum. Also, to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. So, to roll call. I'm Mindy Bernstein and I'm here.
Tisha Tallman here.
And Brianna Washington here.
Thank you for coming, Kimbriana, Tisha.
Of course.
So can you guys see the grant funding sources page now?
I am one of those people that doesn't absorb information from a computer, and I like to have paper. I need to hold paper.
Okay, I can send this. I can send this to you afterwards, Mindy.
That would be wonderful.
So one of the first ones is street outreach. I mean, this is where everybody really starts, right? It's funded by emergency solutions grants. It's about $297,000 a year. The program range for this is 7/1 through 6/30, which is the regular fiscal year. Same with our SSOCE navigation grant. It's a COC funded program, so a continuum of care funded program. It's about $155,000 a year. And I mean, these are just enough. If you think about it, it's just about enough to cover staff, right? Because I have 2 people that are paid out of ESG street outreach. So that's 2 full-time staff, maybe some supplies, maybe some ERE, which is the benefits in the pension comps, right? So with the SSOCE navigation, we have to supplement that grant sometimes because we have 2 staff there as well, with some CDBG funding, so some community development block grant funding. So there's a lot of shell games that we have to kind of play in the grant world to sustain a team as big as we have. We're up to almost 29 people, I believe. So our Wildcat shelter was for a while operated out of CDBG CV funding, which is the COVID monies for community development block grant. We're out of those funds, the $156,000. We do have ARPA SLRP, which is state local fiscal recovery funds that we've moved into at this point. And that's a larger number, but I don't have an exact amount for that. So it is a larger grant. But there's some stipulations around that. So we can do some staffing, we can do some operations through a certain time of the year. So I believe that's through the end of 2024. And then we can no longer staff that shelter with city staff. It has to move into a nonprofit. And I think they're trying to work around that and get some different direction on that from our federal government. But that's for people that are financial and make more money than I do to figure that part of it out. But I monitor the budget with our finance team. So CDBG CV is also funding our HEART team for the next 3 years. And that's $1.2 million, a little over that. And that's broken out over 4 years for staff, vehicles. So it's not very much, amazingly enough. And we just got another award to supplement our HEART grant from Arizona Housing Coalition. That's also state and local fiscal recovery funds. So we're the subrecipient for Arizona Housing Coalition on Crowd to Home, and they've given us $2 million. So with crowd to home, that's going to do things like supplement people's legal fees, their rent, their deposits, their application fees, things of that nature. It's going to take care of our 2 crowd to home navigators' salary. That's a vehicle, so that they'll have a vehicle to, transport their clients around in, and that will supplement Hartwell. So we kind of marry grants to make up the difference where we're maybe short in one grant. We can use the other grant that's termed the same to supplement the other grant. So that's how we're using that money. ADOH also funded us on some mobile shower program and hotel operations, or non-congregate shelter operations. So we did fund Notel through Current. We're about to close that down. So those funds will roll into our mobile shower if there's any funds to expend, or into our Amazon operations until we expend those funds. ESG is the 2 ESGs you see at the bottom of the sheet are just for payroll outreach towards additional payroll to have on the side, just in the event that we don't, in case we need to supplement that original money up top. And street outreach activities such as meal kits, things of that nature, right? Or vehicle expenses, because they are in the rough terrain with their vehicles. They're constantly getting maintenance checkups on those vehicles, and things need repaired like tires or what have you. So as you can see, we really depend on grant funding. We are in the process right now of actually recruiting a grant writer for my area, because we depend on the grants so much. We want to be able to write for some bigger, better grants like SAMHSA grants and things of that nature that give us many different reaches. There's a few SAMHSA grants in the community right now that have behavioral health nurse practitioners tied to them, medical health nurse practitioners tied to them, and stuff like that. So that it gives us that whole health type of approach to our outreach and navigation services. We do have a multidisciplinary team that's about to start that I didn't have on my original slide. We've already hired our outreach person for that. That grant will consist of an outreach person on the city of Tucson that will oversee, and then CBI, OPCS, our family services, and El Rio will be on board on that grant as well, to again provide that whole health outreach. And that'll be part of our homeless protocol process, that those people are actually going to those encampments and assisting people with light wound care, medicine referral, mental health referral, things of that nature. So that's a really exciting thing that's happening in our team too. So I'll show you now the budgets for my general fund. And this is kind of vague, and it changes and it morphs quite a bit. Can you guys see my screen? Let me see if you can see. Let me stop sharing. I had to open a different, can you see the spreadsheet? You can see that?
No.
Okay, Neto, can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the general fund budget that was revised for 23. And all of this spending did not occur. So we had a bunch of money left in our general fund that I did not realize that we had. And so they went in and they did an actual to propose a new budget for our 2024 year. As you can see, our staffing's increased quite a bit. What I would need from general fund is stuff like office supplies, or for instance, recently I needed 2 hubs put in, a whole switch put in on our new building. And I used some of this money for that miscellaneous professional services, because we're hiring an outside contractor to do the work. So I used about $17,000 worth of that money. There's also some fees that they had here that we don't need to pay in our new building, such as electricity, gas, water. I'm sure we're paying electricity, gas, and water, but it's our building, so we don't have a rental expense for that building at all. And in the beginning, we thought we would need a building that we would be renting, and it worked out that we got the old DES building. And that was our assistant city managers doing, Tim. So thank you, Tim. So here you can see just some basic expenses like telephone costs, internet, should I need it, postage, travel expenses for training and other purposes like going to Washington for NAEH and stuff like that. Parking. So my budget's not super complicated. And it's morphing as we go on and we grow. But we do have the proposed budget already figured out for 24. And there's some other line items in here that they're asking, do you need this? What does this include? So we're still working on that, right? It's a growing, changing deal with any budget, especially at this level, because I report several places. I have a lot of grant funding, and so it's a real trip, Mindy, needless to say, to try to manage all the moving parts. But we're getting there. We're creating our budgets, figuring out what we really need, like some unrestricted funding for like, you know, for our birth certificates, IDs, deposits, where we need a lot of that all the time. The ward offices have been super generous. Steve K's office, when he was still council member, donated $50,000 to Housing First, and we have really utilized that over the last year on people that could not get letters of credit from Section 8, getting them in, giving them landlord incentives to take our clients, especially when they're difficult clients, doing their IDs, their birth certificates. We've recently got in with motor vehicle division, and now we can purchase bulk ID vouchers. So it's terrific, right? So we don't have to stress about who's taking the P card down there and paying for it and this and that. We can just hand over a voucher and say, go get your ID, and they do it. And then we can continue with their housing process. So it's been a really real learning experience over the last 18 months. Ward 3 has also, no, Ward 2, Cunningham donated some funds for unrestricted purposes. And we were able to buy beds for our clients that are moving into housing so they don't go into a house with nothing, right? Because that was one of our worries. Why are we how are we going to put these people in a house with no furniture, right? We only have so many donations that come into our warehouse, and it's difficult, especially during COVID. Our warehouse really took a hit. So that we were able to replenish our mattress supply, our beds. We're looking at buying some SOS kits that come from like LifeWorks. You know, they come with the kitchen set, the bath set, all of that. So we're looking at buying some of those. So it's been a real learning experience. Ward 2 has also come in with some funds to get school supplies and art supplies for our kids, because we have about 30 kids at Wildcat now. So that are on summer break. So we need some arts and crafts stuff. Allison's actually going out to get some of that stuff today, because summer just began. And so we're wanting to do that. We're wanting to bring in Tucson Fire with their hose and do some fun stuff for the kids over the summer, and then get them back to school with good supplies. Really neat projects going on.
Question. Brandy, are you familiar with Gap Ministries?
Yes.
Have you ever seen their warehouse?
I haven't.
I have.
Yeah.
This ginormous warehouse that is filled top to bottom with couches, beds, tables. They get donations from Target, Restoration Hardware. I can see Gap Ministry perhaps partnering with the city in assisting with some of the furnishings.
That would be good. That would be fantastic.
Would you be able to approach them, or do you feel a commissioner would be better to approach them?
I think either way, if you have contact, do you have any contact information, Mindy?
it's a little bit old and I have to look it up. There was a point in time where I was looking at them as a possibility of merging my my agency with theirs, and then we were able to stay autonomous. Their director is really quite amazing, and I forgot his name.
So I can find it if you want me to, Mindy, and I'll reach out. I can do that.
Good, yeah, they're faith-based.
Yeah.
Which is where a lot of cities are, anyway. Yeah, Gap Ministries in St. Vincent de Paul used to also give people kits to set up a new house with. They don't take beds as donations any longer because of the bed bug issue.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I remember St. Vincent
Yeah.
from my direct service days. You're muted, Mindy. Still. You're still muted. There you go.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
No, you were muted. I was trying to hear you and you were muted.
About my first, when I first moved to Tucson, we were able to get an apartment, but we didn't have anything in it, not a stove, not a bed, not a couch, not a heater, not a cooler.
All right.
I got my first couch at St. Vincent.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah, I think some of the asks, Brandy, I think collectively the commission and the subcommittees could maybe create a list of additional resources that the city could leverage and or utilize. I think that might help defray some of these additional costs. But if the majority, like you say, if the majority of this new proposed budget is for people, it's staff, because based on what you're seeing, you need more individuals to assist those who are being housed, then that's like, that's probably the significant ask, right? But I think that some of this other stuff, we might be able to put our collective heads together and provide some additional resources to the city.
Absolutely. That would be great, Tisha.
I am wondering, I think what my curiosity has been for you, Brandy, is that if we were to fully envision a robust system of care for individuals with housing insecurities, what would that dollar amount be?
And we're trying to figure that out. So I know that Jason and I have been doing some work with Jay and others on the commission to come up with a plan on what that would look like. And I think that that's part of what our PIT count is about. And Jason and I are actually working on a plan to present that to you guys in July. So the amount of money that it would take literally to house everybody that's unhoused right now and to help everybody that's unhoused that needs it is so enormous. We'd be blown away by it. But at least if we have that enormous overall number, we can take chunks out of it based on priority, right? So I think that that's what Jason's wanting to work on and develop from between now and July, so that we have a clear head around what we want to present to the commission around what you guys can do to support that effort, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Since we are all here, Brandy, do you have more to add, or can I?
Nope, I am done.
Can you stay with us?
I can.
Is there, I think we didn't do a call to the audience, so this is the time. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to comment, we have 15 minutes set aside, 3 minutes a person. And I know that there's some people who are listening in, and if you have anything that you'd like to throw at us, please do. Okay. Next issue on our agenda is we need to.
Mindy, sorry to interrupt, but Joe has his hand up.
Oh, Joe, yes.
Hi, Mindy. I was wondering, I know I looked at the agenda and I saw there was an item that was discussing alternative housing programs and things. And there was kind of a video that was circulated to some people that included kind of some other information about things. Is that item a discussion of the things in that video, or is that going to be something else? Because call the audience is usually stuff that's not on agenda, so I don't want to talk about that if that's something you are going to talk about. You're muted again.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I was not going to talk about the video, although the video is part of the number 4 discussion. I sent out a video that talks about 4 different cities on why housing first works and doesn't work. And what I learned in that was also that HUD will only fund housing first in cities. They do not fund alternative, other kinds of housing, such as tiny home villages. Did you see the video, Joe?
I did. I watched it a couple times, and so since we're still in call of the audience and we're not going to talk about it later, can I take a couple minutes and just talk about it now?
Yes.
Okay. I think we need to consider the source of the video. If you are looking at that, it's from it's an extension of Reason magazine, which is a libertarian publication. The video, the segment on tiny houses was pretty contradictory. They claimed that they're independent from the influence and funding of the federal government, and their expansion is also funded by federal money from the American Rescue Act. They claim that this is stifling innovation that's needed. So there's some contradiction there. The person who's kind of conducting the video, that's Liz Wolf. From her bio, she says that she's not covering tech and speech-related issues. She interviews restaurateurs in the Bronx and writes about how communists, the federal government, and hypersensitive Bushwick hipsters have all historically tried to ruin food and dining for the rest of us. She was formerly managing editor of The Federalist, end quote. The video's expert is a guy named Scott Beyer, quote, he owns a media company called Market Urbanism Report, which advocates for free market urban policy. In addition to his work for governing, Beyer writes regular columns for Forbes, The Independent Institute, and Tax Credit Advisor, end quote. The man in Houston they used to talk about systems there is Torrey Gaddis. He is a founding senior fellow with the Urban Reform Institute. Under their principles is one that says, quote, in general, cities are better off with more market-oriented land use policies than prescriptive central planning, end quote. What you've got is a group of people who I would kind of characterize as anti-government advocates telling you why government programs don't work. And as examples, they're doing that tiny housing village. And the success of that is that apparently it's supposed to be cheaper than what you can do in a city. I don't think it's news to anybody that land outside of cities further away from city centers is less expensive than what's in a city center. Their other example is the Haven for Hope campus. It's 22 acres. It cost about $100 million to build. Ongoing costs are funded about half by government, city, county, and state funding, and half private philanthropy and contributions from the United Way. So I don't know if there's a local NGO or if the government knows somebody who wants to contribute 22 urban acres on $100 million to building something like that. If it exists, I'm sure we'd all be happy to work with it, but it doesn't seem like something that is relevant for Tucson and ongoing. The video presents a graph about shifting funds from shelters to permanent housing, in kind of a, again, it's shown in kind of a nefarious light. But I think, more permanent housing is something we need.
One simple but brilliant trick to cool.
And I hope that, I think the hope is perennially that if you provide more housing, permanent housing solutions, there's less of a need for temporary shelter. If you want to talk about Houston, I can get you, there was a really good paper last year from researchers at Texas Southern University and the Sankofa Research Institute, or both actually in Houston, about housing density, pro-development policies, and whether that's helping with regards to affordability and segregation. It is skeptical, I would say, of some of the claims made by the video. And the other thing the video kind of presents is that the problem is, that zoning keeps innovation out. Zoning is a big problem, and that's not in any way a consensus. That is something that's being pushed in Arizona. If you saw the state legislature's Housing Supply Study Committee, that was pushed by the Arizona Multi-Housing Association, the Home Builders Association, and the Arizona Realtors Association. And the basic premise is that if you repeal zoning laws and free up developers, they will get to work on making so much housing that profits and asset values will drop. They'll make less profit, but it'll make housing more affordable for everyone. And that hasn't worked really in areas that's been studied. I can get you the reports. There are a couple really good ones in Canada. I've mentioned, I think in March, there were a couple reports from the Urban Institute about why those kind of zoning liberalization policies don't really fulfill what they're claimed to. The basic underlying conclusion of the reports was that in a 3 to 9 year period, liberalizing zoning like that, deregulating it effectively, can produce a 0.8% increase in housing units, less than 1%. It's statistically significant, but it's not something that really makes an impact, and that it doesn't actually mitigate affordability. It doesn't help that at all. There are 2 reports that they came out with within a couple of weeks, and they're pretty good. And if you want any of the data and the resources we have on that, please let me know. I'm happy to provide them. Thank you for your time. I'm sure I went over 3 minutes, and if you have any questions, again, let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. My apologies, I did not research who put that video out. I appreciate that you did. I just watched it and didn't look at who it was by and all the people, so good on you.
Well, I understand, and it's always interesting to see what other things places are doing, and I think it's great to know, if they're opponents of housing first policy, if they're opponents of us coming together via government to do these kind of actions to help people, like what are those arguments? So it's beneficial in any sense. I think if there was perhaps a less ideologically oriented group that took a more balanced look at that, it could be a better examination. So, thanks.
Great. Okay. Any other call to the audience? We need to elect a chairperson for the commission. And I'm hoping.
Mindy,
that-
may I jump in?
Yes.
Yes, that's in the agenda, but subsequent to making out this agenda, I put on for tomorrow's agenda, election of a committee chair. If you'd like to wait till tomorrow to have the full discussion with the full commission, you may want to do that. Just throwing that as an option.
Sure. Good. Moving on with the agenda.
So do you want to wait? Commissioners, do you want to wait till tomorrow?
I don't have any attachments to today or tomorrow. Anybody else?
I don't have any attachments to today or tomorrow either, Mindy.
Could someone move then that this will be, this item will be delayed until tomorrow's full agenda meeting? Because it's on the agenda and you should,
So moved.
a second,
I'll second that.
okay, and then a vote.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
I'm wondering if this might be a time for us to, and besides the housing first, I've always envisioned tiny home villages, Tucson Heart Hospitals, that before we move into agenda number 4, I'm wondering if there's anything that other commissioners would like to talk about now. No? Okay. Brandy, what I would like to bring up is whatever it is that we can do to support you. And as the Housing First Commission, if you share with us what you need, it would be easier for me to bring that into, well, just to bring it into discussion. When I look at your budget, I'm aghast. It's, at this point, I was hoping to see millions and millions of dollars put in to that, to your budget. And I have thought about this issue for quite a long time, and I've come to some suppositions that I have checked out with other people. And also an institutional memory of what Tucson looked like in 1970, in 1985 and 86. In terms of indigent behavioral health care and healthcare in general. So I think we've got, we were tasked by the mayor and council to come up with innovative ways to find solutions to a national global issue, actually. And I think that we need to feel safe enough to bring those outside. I need to feel safe enough to bring those outside of the box thoughts forward to the commission or the subcommittee. Because I think that we're, as a nation, wringing our hands and trying to figure out how to fix everything. And I keep coming back to a very simple equation, is that our medical care system is broken in this country, that we are now managed by for-profit, primarily, not completely, but for-profit insurance companies are managing healthcare in America, except for people on Medicare or access. And so unless we're able to put together some, if I'm way off base, please call me on that, because I don't have a brain like Joe. So, this subcommittee for me is so important. Housing First as a concept for equity for people. And besides Housing First, I think that we need to look at options where Housing First may not be the best and only choice, but we were tasked with Housing First and stay within that. I don't really have anything else to say. I get really nervous talking at a computer and seeing my face and not seeing you only. I get derailed a bit. But I would like to, invite some conversation about how, how we're not looking at millions of dollars being put in housing first. And how much money are we putting into first responders, revolving door mental health care, violent offenders in prisons and jails. And we take a look at all those fundings and put that into prevention and supportive care, there might be a better chance of resolving this issue. It breaks my heart to see the encampments everywhere I travel now. And it wasn't like this 40 years ago. We didn't see this 30 years ago or 20 years ago. And
I have to agree with you, Mindy, about, I mean, I think that that's one of the reasons why I'm in this role is because, give me a bunch of grants. I know how to marry them, and make them work and make the dollars stretch and figure out staffing and putting people where they fit the best and can do the most and be the most effective with the little resources that we have. Yes, I would like to see millions of dollars in housing first. I was just doing a report for school, as a matter of fact, because I'm in my master's program. And one of the things said in 2022, 56% of our federal spending goes into our healthcare. 56%. So that's like Medicaid funded programs, Medicare, school health practitioners and stuff like that, right? So I was shocked by that. And there was just a little bitty amount that goes into our social services. I think it was like 17%. That's not very, I was like, really? Wow.
And for
Yeah.
people with chronic illnesses, especially people who don't have families, wow, 17%. Okay. There was a program. Yes, Joe.
Oh, go ahead. If you had something to say next, go for it.
I just wanted to share a little. When I entered into working in indigent behavioral health, I needed a practicum placement where I didn't have to counsel people individually. Since I felt too messed up to be anybody's therapist, so I was hired to be a family advocate at Keno Hospital, which was the only psychiatric beds in Pima County. But I ended up getting hired in on a team called the Transitional Network Team. And anybody who was hospitalized, the TNT case manager worked with that individual while they were in the hospital, got to know them, developed a relationship, and then connected that individual and stayed with that individual until they were hooked in with one of the two behavioral, I think there were just two behavioral health, community behavioral health institutions in Tucson. That was Sam Hack, before you guys were born, Sam Hack and La Frontera. Carondelet came in a little bit later. But we had within the hospital, we were based in the hospital and we worked, and nobody was discharged unless they had a place to go and live. People were not discharged to the street. It is how this system began. Or it was one of the iterations of what deinstitutionalization looks 50 years down the line. Nobody, I don't think, was projecting we would be looking at such a broken system all around, or not only behavioral health, the support services for chronically ill people who are indigent. And my blood pressure has to come down because I just get so mad at how we're here. So how do we fix it? And the way that I see us fixing it is changing national policy. And I wonder if Tucson can do a pilot project to show how another way of doing things outside the box saves money in the end.
I think that's a segue to what I would kind of want to talk about, Minnie. And what you're talking about, like building relationships and taking people through a process and really assuring that they get taken care of is kind of the wraparound service part and the outreach that I feel like our Housing First program is designed for. So I think that's a good, that really fits into kind of the DNA of what we're doing. But what you're just describing with kind of moves towards profit generating entities with regards to healthcare is, like you say, it's a symptom of what's happening at all levels. And it is the push that the people that made the video are where they're winning. And if you're familiar with Matthew Desmond, he wrote a book a few years ago, it was Evicted. It was won a Pulitzer Prize. It spends about 300 pages going through issues with the voucher system in Milwaukee. And he collected a ton of data. He's got copious anecdotes that really personalize what happens to people in these systems. And really my only disappointment with it was after the terrific documentation, he gets to the end and you see where these systems fail people. He says, maybe we need to do more of the voucher system and expand that more. And it just blew my mind that could be the conclusion, not systemic change, but to do more of what kind of halfway works. And for a lot of people doesn't work. Well, he's got a new book coming out, and he did an interview with The Atlantic the other day, and he said something that hit me. I want to put it here. The direct quote is, "We're giving a patient with stage 4 cancer an Advil and wondering why it doesn't work. In 2020, we spent $53 billion on direct housing assistance to the needy through public housing and Section 8 vouchers. We spent $193 billion on homeowner tax subsidies. Most of the benefit goes to families with 6-figure incomes. Most white Americans are homeowners. Most Black and Latinx Americans aren't because of our systemic dispossession of people of color from the land. It's really hard to think of a social policy that does a better job of amplifying our economic and racial inequalities than our current housing policy does." And I think that speaks to kind of where we're giving help. And, I'm not saying anything against home ownership policies that want to help people try to get into home ownership, but, to keep people from having to enter the Housing First systems and going out and becoming homeless, doing a better job of making sure renting is a stable form of housing is something we could do a lot better job of doing. And from those numbers, it sounds like we're sacrificing a lot of that in ways that don't entirely make sense. And I think we can talk about housing at a higher level if you want, but this isn't, I know this is Housing First Subcommittee, and I see Tisha's got her hand up, so I will cede.
Thank you for those comments, Joe. And I just wanted to add, we are bringing Matthew Desmond here. So like you stated, he was the Pulitzer Prize winning author of Evicted out of Wisconsin, where he had lived with folks and experienced their lives along with them. And this latest one is called Poverty by America. We're bringing him here December 12th. One thing that was glaring to me, Joe, is, the book talks about systemic issues and the layers and layers of things that were done that may have not only not address the problem, but put us in decades of stagnation. So one of my big takeaways was there's been very little shift in the percentage of folks experiencing homelessness. And I felt like the call was for innovation and creativity, recognizing all these layers of institutional and structural barriers, including racism and strict covenants and redlining and on and on and on, and housing policy and where dollars have gone, where dollars have not gone. So I would offer up, I mean, I know that's not till December 12th, but I would offer up the commission an opportunity to meet with Matthew Desmond on our time. And we'll cover the expense for that, because I think that he might be able to widen our thoughts a little around this. But also, this is the Housing First Subcommittee, and maybe he can just assist in coming up with strategy or thought around Housing First models. And I did want to say, Brandy, that I thought the presentation was wonderful. I appreciate the time and effort that you and your team have put into this and the preparation for today's subcommittee meeting. I'm disappointed there aren't more people to hear the presentation. And I want you to know that we're here on the subcommittee to support Housing First and the Housing First effort. So only you, as the experts in providing services and programming, can come up with the questions for us or direct us into areas to look into. And we're at your disposal for that. And as many resources as we can bring to the table on that, we're happy to make sure that we bring our collective brains, resources, referrals, services to the table to make it a success.
Thank you, Tisha. I appreciate that so much.
Do you think that would be a good conversation, not just between Housing First, but the CEHD as a whole, with Matthew Desmond, if that's a possibility, or if he's giving a presentation, maybe the CEHD members could be invited to attend?
Yeah, I think that we can open it up to the full commission. There are two things that he's doing. One is the broader presentation in the evening at the Fox Theater, so we're opening it up to as many people that would like to hear him. And then the next day, we're doing a smaller convening of folks that work in the area. Of course, Housing First, Brandy, you're more than welcome to be a part of this discussion. I'm sure it can inform the work as well.
Thank you. I'd like that. Let me know when, and I'm there.
And I think, Tish, you mentioned kind of the conclusion was around systemic issues and structural barriers, and the need for other kind of structures. And I think my frustration a lot of times with the desire for this push for, well, what we need is innovation and what we need is something new, is that as Mindy talks about, a lot of these things are things that we've been over with and we've receded on in the last 40, 50 years. And I always kind of pin it to that point in the early 70s when Nixon retreats from fair housing, from affirmatively furthering fair housing, the Fair Housing Act, from all those things, HUD funding freezes, the total ceasement of public housing. And we've seen, when you talk to housing researchers, and I'm sure Mr. Desmond would say this, the correlation of homelessness is strongest with housing cost. More than anything else, you can look at as a population. So why is the housing cost out of hand? Well, the structures that are less financialized and commodified in housing, I'm not talking physically, I'm talking about financially, have again receded, whether that be public housing. Tucson's Faircloth number, I will always quote, is I think 1,926 units. We're 400 units short of that, meaning we've lost 20-something% of our public housing over the last 25 years or so. We don't see pushes for things like housing co-ops. Housing co-ops were big. There was a great Times article a few months ago about Co-op City in New York. You know, and the advancement we've seen is really community land trusts, but we know that our community land trusts could all be doing more with more funding. So those structures haven't been something we rely on anymore, but we do rely more and more on the market. And the market is interested in making the profit. And as long as that is the concern, I think it's troubling. There's a Canadian author, Cory Doctorow, who had a blog post about this a couple weeks ago. He said, transforming housing from a human right to an asset was always going to end in a failure to build new housing stock and regulate rental markets. A city you can't live in is a failure. A system that can't provide decent housing is a failure. The whole crowd, your boss is right, actually, kind of Chicago economic, libertarian, neoliberal crowd won. We don't build public housing. We don't regulate rents. And there are things we can do instead of trying to build everything around aligning market incentives that could do. So what I'm talking about is really systems that maybe we're pioneering from the New Deal to Great Society eras, but is that maybe that's considered thinking outside the box now? Maybe that's new reasoning, but we've abandoned those, and my personal assessment is we're worse off for it, right?
If I may, so I think creative and innovative sometimes has a negative connotation, like we're scrapping everything we've done before and we're going to do something new. And I actually think that some of the creativity and innovation that folks are talking about is actually just reframing issues, just thinking about things differently. And I think that, zoning, Nolan Gray, I had a conversation with him and he spoke at the Arizona Housing Coalition a few months back, and he writes a book about zoning, and it's well, we have this notion of everyone having a single family home. Well, what has that done? That's resulted in zoning in areas where you have space that's taken up by fewer number of people and not accounting for the rest of the folks. So, although, zoning has taken on a whole new breadth of people being against zoning, and, there are all sorts of discussion and discourse around zoning now, but just thinking about, what we do in regards to housing policy and zoning, and how that might serve as a barrier. There are winners and losers with everything that we do, including all public policy around housing. So how do we prioritize affordable housing? Some of the discourse has also been around, we're in a housing crisis. Well, I think we're in an affordable housing crisis. We're not in a general housing crisis. And it's how we define affordable housing, how we defined the situation we're currently in dictates, what the solutions that we're going to come up with. And maybe it's something that was done a long time ago, but just thinking of it differently. I think of one municipality, not only in regards to housing folks, but keeping folks in homes, right? So once there is affordable housing, people are in there, that there's not generational move out, right? So one generation gets in and the next one goes out. Well, we know that there are policies surrounding being able to keep families and communities in place. One such idea in the community that I lived in was freezing property taxes for folks over a certain age. So they weren't pushed out of their homes as elderly. You know, one of the largest difficulties that we faced as service providers is the aging population surrounding the experience of health.
Well said. Joe?
Yeah. I'll try to be brief and frank with this in the humble opinion of someone who's only been working on this for 5 years, but tries to take in as much information as possible. There's nobody I want to listen to less than M. Nolan Gray. M. Nolan Gray's most famous essay was in Reason Magazine, and it was called Abolish Zoning, all of it. M. Nolan Gray is now working on his PhD at the UCLA Lewis Center. He works for California YIMBY. And before that, he was a fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. The Mercatus Center, for those who don't know, Mercatus is a Latin word that means markets. It's a pro-libertarian think tank. It's funded by the Koch Industries. And their only board member emeritus is Charles Koch, of the $68 billion, 14th most wealthy person in the world. That's where his ideology is coming from. And I think when you look at the reports like those that have come out of the Urban Institute that say, look, deregulation and zoning is not something that helps us with regards to affordability. I think that I don't think we even need that to discredit his work, but I think it does.
And I thought I put the disclaimer in there, Joe, and I apologize if I was obtuse with that. That certainly he advocates for the abolition of zoning, which is not the case to be made. It's certainly what I would not want to put forward. But he was a speaker that was provided as thought for people to start thinking about zoning, and some of his research does raise issues around zoning and how zoning has served as exclusionary to keep some folks out of housing that could be affordable. But no, by no means do I want to advocate for the abolition of zoning. And I do know that that is a discourse that has taken hold around this country.
Gotcha. I wasn't sure, I wanted to be clear about his credentials and what we were talking about and where he's coming from. And no, I don't think there's anybody in housing that says, you know what, every city's zoning is perfect and we love it and we don't want to change any of it. That's not how neighbors should work. Nothing should be set in amber forever. I think a lot of communities are concerned about displacement and gentrification. And we've talked a little bit about zoning and exclusionary zoning in the housing desegregation subcommittee and those kind of things too. And what constitutes zoning? All zoning is exclusionary in some form. That's land use. It's designed to make sure that, industrial factory, warehouse, whatever, doesn't get built next to the kindergarten, right? It's designed to exclude specific land uses. And the problem is when that becomes racially exclusionary, or when you end up with even economically segregated kind of neighborhoods. So I think there are ways to promote desegregation and do so without some of the drastic things that are proposed as solutions, but really I think are more likely to not just concern people about displacement and gentrification, but statistically in Tucson, we've looked at that with the Gary Pivo report. What happened with the Central Business District and Infill Incentive District? What happened when we incentivized the market rate development? What happened when we put a big upzone overlay on places? And it's things like a shift in Barrio Viejo that was 60-40 Hispanic and versus non-Hispanic whites, and that's totally flipped just in like 8 years. So there are those concerns, and there's nothing more locally concerning than zoning. And I wish we would work on it more at that level rather than saying some of the things that get pushed even out of, again, the Arizona legislature's housing supply study subcommittee, which was that just zoning bad and have less of it, and that's how we're going to solve anything. Because I don't think it's productive. I don't think it contributes to solutions, and the real work is going to be granular. Go ahead, Mindy. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. You're very well read. About zoning, I just wanted to add a little piece that I've been talking to real estate agents and many different people, that our housing crisis started looking as bad as it is now when for-profit financial companies were buying up homes and multifamily residences and then increasing the rents to whatever the market would bear. And there was a woman who I had met on Social Security, disability, Social Security. That was her income. A California company bought the apartment complex and raised the rent $500. So I think, as a commission, we might want to make some recommendations about not allowing corporations to fill their portfolio with our single family residences, that a single family residence or a small is bought by a family or people who move into it, own it, pay taxes, or if it becomes an Airbnb, that there's special taxes put in to help support affordable housing. Anyway, that's how I am understanding our housing crisis now. The affordability issue is that there are for-profit businesses buying up everything that's available. So how do we change that? Does that
That's the
sound correct to anybody?
commodification and financialization I'm talking about, Mindy. And part of the concern is it's not just, we've always had mom and pop landlords, right? We've always had people who run businesses, and part of it is being that. And the shift over the last 2008 kind of to now has been that it's bigger players, it's private equity, it's hedge funds, it's all that. And in Arizona, I think in 2020, what was the statistic? 31% of single family homes were bought by investors, not
Right.
somebody who wants to live there. So that big change is, instead of people being able to get into home buying to get that housing stability, those people are now having to rent from a private equity landlord, and it
Yeah.
pressures the entire rest of the market. Some of these, if you're familiar with that ProPublica expose from a few months ago on RealPage software, it's software that companies in Tucson do use, and all over the country, that tells them how much to raise rents and also how many units to leave vacant. It will tell them you will make money if you constrain supply by leaving units vacant, that they're housing units not just not used as housing via short-term rentals, but also that they're just ones not put on the market. And the realtors will tell you, or landlords will tell you, we would be really hesitant to raise something $300 or $400 a month. When we're looking at 20, 30, 40% rent raises, that's not something we would normally do. But when the software tells us to do it, I don't remember the statistic in that. It was overwhelmingly, most of them will go with what RealPage says.
Joe, I need to interrupt you. Just because we have 4 minutes left to our meeting,
Sure.
and I love what you're saying. So important. is there some final comments anybody wishes?
I'd just like to say, Joe, you're absolutely on target. Some of these rentals that we're looking for out in the community on, feet on the ground. They've slapped some paint on it and a few freaking, sticky tiles on the floor and call it $1,200, $1,500 a month. And it's killing our low income families. So you're absolutely on point.
So maybe we can bring this, talk about this a little bit more, but one of the things as a commissioner that I would venture out to recommend to mayor and council is that we set up some zoning laws about not allowing big, what did you call them, Joe? Equity hedge
Yeah,
fund,
private equity, hedge funds fall under that category, private equity.
but they're not
It's
allowed, right?
really
they're-
investors. I'm not sure you can do it through zoning. The state of Arizona is going to be really hard on anything like that. You will, like when we were talking about source of income discrimination, one of our big conversations you'll remember was around how much pushback and lawsuits we were going to get from Arizona Multi-Housing, and which is a landlord lobby, and those kind of organizations. They are going to lobby at the state level against anything you want to do in that area. I still think it's worth doing.
Think big or go home. Is any other last comments from anybody before we close? Okay, meeting adjourned at 5:28. Is that okay?
Thank you. Remember,
Thank you all.
tomorrow's a full commission meeting.
Thank you all.
We'll see you then. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Joe.